Hello everyone, my name is Kirill and you are on the AutoAdviser channel. Today we will talk about the types of internal combustion engines, which are mainly used in passenger cars, and we will classify them according to the relative position of the cylinders. Now I have an 8-cylinder V12 engine in my hands, but we will start the conversation from the very beginning. For this, I will have to disassemble this model. And so, the first gasoline engine, which was invented back in 1883, was a single-cylinder engine, which is now in my hands. A few words about terminology. This is called an engine cylinder. Why? Because it's shaped like a cylinder inside. And inside the cylinder, the piston reciprocates. Here is the piston of the engine, and it moves up and down inside the cylinder. The reciprocating movement of the piston turns into a rotational movement of the crankshaft. Now I am rotating the crankshaft. And as I already said, the first engine was a single cylinder, and it had a power of about 1 horsepower. And in order to increase the power of that engine, it was necessary to increase the cylinder volume or increase the piston stroke. All this would lead to increasing the overall dimensions of the engine itself. The second negative point is that the single-cylinder engine is unbalanced because the reciprocating motion of the cylinder is uneven. There is only one cylinder and there is nothing to balance its movement with. Now we need to talk about a very important characteristic that affects power. It's called engine displacement. So, the engine displacement is the sum of the displacements of each cylinder, in our case, one cylinder. So the volume of the cylinder is calculated from the bore, which is diameter of the cylinder, and stroke, which is the total distance traveled by the piston as it moves from bottom dead center to top dead center. So the volume of this internal cavity is the working volume of one cylinder. Then we sum up all the cylinders and get the full displacement of the engine. The displacement of an engine is measured in cubic centimeters or in liters. Well, you all probably heard that I have, for example, an engine with a volume of 2 liters, or for example, I have 1.5 liters, and so on. So, this is why in order to increase engine power, we need to increase its working displacement. And for this, we can either increase the cylinder diameter or increase the piston stroke. It all makes sense, doesn't it? After the technical possibilities of improving a single-cylinder engine were limited, the next level of development took place and the 2-cylinder inline engine was invented. Now I have assembled a model of a 2-cylinder inline engine. Why inline? Because the cylinders are arranged in a straight line. And why 2-cylinder? Because, well, there are 2 of them. Everything is logical. By simply increasing the number of cylinders, you can make an inline 3, as I have in my hands now. Then you can make an inline 4, an inline 5, why not, and an inline 6 engine. So what are the advantages of the inline engine? It's a relatively uncomplicated design, so it's relatively inexpensive. It's also quite easy to operate. The disadvantages include the fact that with an increase in the number of cylinders, the length of the engine increases. Therefore, such an engine is not suitable for every car in terms of layout. Also, with an increase in the length of the engine, the rigidity of the structure is lost, and that broken movement of the pistons creates a jump rope effect, which affects the camshafts as well as the crankshaft. By the way, this engine that I have in my hands now, Inline 6-cylinder engine, is one of the most balanced of all types of internal combustion engines. And so it turns out that there is no point in increasing the number of cylinders anymore, as the length's only going to grow. So the next step in the development of engine design was the invention of the so-called V-shaped engine. Why V-shaped? Well, because its design resembles the letter V. And so, now I have in my hands a model of the V engine. Why V-shaped? Well, because in this plane the arrangement of the cylinders looks like letter V. And so, this is a V6 because there are 6 cylinders. These cylinders are located in 2 banks, and these banks are at some angle to each other, so as you already understand. The first advantage of the V engine immediately catches your eye. This is its more compact dimensions. Here are 6 cylinders, so if it was an inline 6 engine, then it would have about these lengths. And since we use a V-shaped design, now it's shorter. The second advantage is the increased power of this engine with relatively small overall dimensions. And the third advantage is a rigid structure, since everything is located very compactly here and there are no long shafts that could bend somewhere under load. Did you know that V12 engine, which has 12 cylinders instead of 6 cylinders, 6 on each bank, is one of the most balanced engines of all internal combustion engines? And we could end this video on this, since we have discussed 2 main types of engines according to the relative position of the cylinders. This is an inline engine, where the cylinders are in a line, and a V-shaped engine. But in fact, there are other modifications that are based on these 2 basic types. For example, there is a so-called boxer engine, where the angle between the cylinders is 180 degrees. Let me show you this. And so in my hands I have a model of the so-called boxer engine, where 2 blocks of cylinders are opposite each other and moreover in the same horizontal plane. In a car, such an engine is installed in this position. These engines are installed on Porsche cars, also typical for Subaru and some Volkswagen models. The first advantage of a boxer engine is low center of gravity. It's a relatively flat engine that allows you to keep the car stable during some sharp maneuvers. The second advantage is the balance of this engine, especially the 6-cylinder boxer engine, as in my case. This engine is very balanced, there are no vibrational loads here, and therefore power delivery is very smooth. Some sources claim that boxer engines are harder to maintain compared to V-twin or inline engines. But this information is like 50-50, since a lot depends on the specific car brand and a driving style. Some of the disadvantages of this boxer engine are the same as for the V-shaped engine. Why? Since in these 2 types, for example, there must be 2 camshafts on this side and on this side. That is, camshafts are duplicated, valve covers are duplicated, engine control systems are duplicated, and like fuel supply system, and so on. Therefore, a V-type and a boxer engine is more complex in design than an inline engine. The boxer and a V engine are more complex, so they are more expensive, both to manufacture and to maintain. And the last nuance that concerns only the boxer engine is oil consumption, since the design of the boxer engine does not have a classic oil pan, as in conventional engines. And in conventional engines, the oil is at the bottom. Here in this engine, the oil is in the plane of the cylinders, so it enters these same cylinders, which increases oil consumption. And let's look at the last type of engine that is used in passenger cars. This is the so-called VR type. The engineers thought, what if we combine the advantages of an inline and V engine? So the VR type engine was born. Let me show you what it looks like. A characteristic feature of the VR engine is the staggered arrangement of cylinders, as I now have in my hands. In addition to the advantages achieved, which were inherited from the inline and V-shaped engines, there were big disadvantages in this VR engine. The first disadvantage is insufficient cooling. Since many cylinders were close in one space, it was impossible to provide cooling in the zone of their contact. And the second big disadvantage is the absolute imbalance of this type of engine. And so we examined with you the main types of engines in terms of the relative arrangement of cylinders. And I remind you that this is an inline arrangement, then a V engine, then a boxer engine, and the so-called VR engine. It's also worth noting that the vibrational load and balance of these engines depends not only on their type, but also on the number of cylinders. Now you will see a table that shows which types of engines and how many cylinders are most balanced. For example, this table shows that the most balanced engines are the V12 engine, the Inline 6, and the Boxer 6. And the most unfortunate in terms of balance are the VR5 and VR6 engines. If you ask yourself which engine is the best of all these types, then there is no definite answer, because as you understand, each engine has its own advantages and disadvantages. Among other things, the efficiency of the engine is also affected by other systems, such as the engine turbine, the variable valve timing system, and so on. Therefore, it's necessary to analyze whether this is a good or a bad engine specifically in every case, since in each of these types there are examples of successful and unsuccessful engines. By the way, I almost forgot. If you need any spare parts for any of these engines, be sure to visit our website AutoAdviser.by, the link will be in the description. Basically, that's all that I wanted to say about the types of engines. I hope you liked my explanations and my models, so be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. All the best to you and see you again.